Well, what a remarkable anniversary this is. 80 years since the D-Day landings. Ellie, as you can see, is in Normandy. And as we build up to what is going to be an incredible day, Ellie, what's happening there behind you?
Well, Stephen, it's hard to believe with the sun beating down just after dawn here in Normandy on Gold Beach, one of those 5 beaches which was stormed by 150,000 Allied troops on the morning of the 6th of June 1944. It is hard to believe the bloodshed and the chaos that would have occurred just below where we are standing right now. In just a few moments' time, at 6:25 this morning, it will be exactly 80 years to the minute since those first troops stepped foot onto the sand at Normandy, and what bravery and courage they showed on that day. It was a day that changed the course of the Second World War, and it is an absolute hub of activity here on Gold Beach. This is where so many thousands of British troops landed on that morning. You may be able to make out behind me, I'll just step out of the shot, Stephen, there's the Royal British Legion that has just gathered here on the beach in front of me. They've got a very large circular flag that they have laid out. You might be able to hear the bells chiming from the church in the background, and we have serving military personnel and cadets gathering around that Royal British Legion flag, their heads bowed. They are taking a moment of silence to remember what happened here 80 years ago on this very beach and 5 other beaches here in Normandy, named as Omaha, Utah, Juno, Gold and Sword. You may also be able to hear the humdrum of engines of British military vehicles. Many of them are genuine. They were here in 1944 and they have been preserved and brought here. I've actually just spoken to a man of ex-armed forces who said he's brought his vehicle that he bought himself from England over on the ferry to be on these very beaches for the 80th anniversary. We've also got a fly past as we speak right now of 2 military helicopters crossing over the beach. Stephen, there are thousands of people watching here from all around the world, cross generations, just taking in the scenes here on Gold Beach. At 6:25 this morning, we are going to hear from a piper, and this piper is going to be brought to Gold Beach on a landing craft, and then a duck, an amphibious vehicle, is going to bring that piper onto Gold Beach, just below where we are now. He will start playing at precisely 6:25 this morning, the exact moment when those troops landed on the beaches here in Normandy. And I can only imagine it is going to be the most beautiful, moving sight.
It's been an incredible few days, hasn't it? And I know you've frankly, Ellie, met some incredible people.
No, I really have, Stephen. Yesterday was a day of 2 parts. Of course, the most important part of all of this is the veterans, those brave, courageous men who stormed these very beaches here at Gold. They stormed the beach and then took 6 miles inland from the Germans. It was the most incredible feat. And I spoke yesterday to a man called Ronald, and he was just 18 years old when he stormed the beaches here at Gold. And I asked him if he was scared, and he said, no, I wasn't scared, not at all. I knew that I had a job to do, and I got on with it, and that will always stay with me. So Ronald Hendry, who is now a 98-year-old, I asked him what it was like to be back in Normandy.
But what is on my left-hand side are rows and rows of graves, and that's what we've really come for. And we must remember when we talk about D-Day, what we've come for is this very thing here, is the boys that can't get up out of that ground. And they're the ones. I'm filling up.
No, I know.
Yeah. And they, in fact, are the ones we've come to honour today. Not us, them.
That's Ronald Hendry, who I spoke to yesterday, and it's so hard not to be moved, Stephen. You may have seen Queen Camilla speaking to a veteran yesterday and crying herself, hearing about that powerful testimony of what that veteran saw that day, and it was exactly the same experience for me speaking to Ronald Hendry. He says that coming to Normandy is a set of complex emotions for him. He's very happy to be with his friends and happy to be here. It was the start of the liberation of Europe, but it does overwhelm him with what he saw on these beaches and the friends that he lost. And legacy is so important as well, isn't it, Stephen? You might have seen that poll last week that said that 48% of young people couldn't tell you what D-Day was. So it's so important that we hear from those veterans, we hear their testimony, we hear about what happened on these very beaches and what happened in the Battle of Normandy afterwards. So I'm really glad that we've just shared that with Ronald. I did just want to bring in two guests that I've got with me this morning who can explain what we're going to see on the beaches this morning. This is Major Andy Atkinson, Squadron Commander of the 47 Commando Royal Marines, and Sub-Lieutenant George Waddington. Really honoured to see you both here this morning. Thank you very much for being here on D-Day 80. Andy, should we start with you, Major Andy Atkinson? You are a landing craft officer, so you can explain to us what exactly happened here on the morning of the 6th of June 1944.
Okay, so we're currently at Arromanches, which is not the site of the actual landing. The landing is just further down the beach. So at 7:30, the Hampshire Regiment and the Devon and Dorsets and the Sherwood Rangers went ashore, and they fought their way up to the hills to clear to Arromanches. After that, the Royal Marine Commandos landed, and then they fought their way through occupied France, and they liberated Port-en-Besson. 47 Commando was the unit that landed at that time, and I'm now from 47 Commando, and we recreate that landing every year.
And you are recreating that landing this morning, aren't you?
Yes, so as soon as we're finished here, we're going to make our way up the beach and coordinate the landing of 4 landing craft and about 60 troops at 9 o'clock.
And how does that make you feel, thinking about those great men that went before you?
It's an honour. I met a 4/8 veteran earlier this week, and he's a very charming 100-year-old man, and it was a pleasure to go to his birthday and meet him. He seemed like he was still ready for the fight. It was a very, very proud old man.
They're just the most incredible generation, aren't they? We were just speaking about, I met a veteran yesterday and I asked him if he was scared, and he said, no, I couldn't be scared, I had a job to do and I needed to get on with that. Is that something that you experience in the armed forces?
So I've served in Iraq and Afghanistan myself. The fear of letting down your comrades is worse than the fear of being injured, shot or killed, because that's something that obviously would live with you forever. So that's the pressure they probably felt. They just didn't want to let down the guy next to them. What
sort of obstacles, what sort of scenes would have met the British troops here at Gold Beach?
So the Germans had prepared a lot of obstacles for the beach. So there was metal obstacles designed to stop the landing craft. Some of them had mines on them. But before the landings, clearance teams from the Royal Navy and Royal Marines went ashore and they removed or deactivated some of the obstacles so the landing craft could get ashore. And then once you got to within wading distance, that's when the Army engineers would take over. So a lot of the obstacles were cleared, however, not all of them. And then when the landing craft landed, a lot of them hit mines and unfortunately were lost.
It's really important to remember those great men that were lost on these very beaches that we're standing above right now. I want to bring in Sub-Lieutenant George Waddington, who's with the Royal Navy right now. George Waddington, tell me about the Royal Navy's involvement on D-Day, because they were central to all of this, weren't they?
Absolutely. So as now, the Royal Marines do all the landing craft operations, but back on D-Day, it was Royal Navy Volunteer Reservists. There were 5,500 officers that took charge of the landing craft. But not only that, they were also essential with the naval bombardment of the shores to make sure that they took out as many of the gun positions that were aimed at the beaches here. They also were escorting all of the merchant vessels, which carried all the logistics over to support the D-Day cause.
And what many people aren't aware of is actually D-Day was 24 hours later than it was meant to be. It was meant to be the 5th of June 1944. There was that delay, wasn't there? Tell us a bit more about that.
Absolutely. So the weather had a huge impact. So there's a storm that went through on the 5th, so delayed it by 24 hours. And they made probably one of the biggest decisions of the war to only delay it by 24 hours rather than delay it by 2 weeks, which would have been the next thing, and then kept it a secret for another 2 weeks.
And what is so fascinating, I mean, this is a question to both of you, is that the Germans knew that there was likely to be an invasion, but they didn't know where exactly it was going to happen. And there was a lot of fake news put out. It was a very complicated operation to actually get the troops here, which is actually the furthest part away from the UK, isn't it?
So there was a lot of debate amongst the German commanders. A lot of them thought it was going to be Normandy, and they were fighting for resources. However, the confusion amongst them obviously helped us because they never committed to defending a location specifically, and they kept their forces spread along the coast.
And what many people aren't aware of, I was down at Pegasus Bridge last night, which is actually where this whole operation started, because just as you say, the British took that bridge to stop the Germans from coming up and essentially meeting our troops here on the beaches. That was really vital, wasn't it, to cut off those bridges?
Yeah, well, the biggest issue facing the landing forces is all the Panzer divisions, which is held in reserve in the background. And obviously, if the paratroopers are there to stop the Panzers, be able to come and stop the Allies establishing a beachhead.
Sub-Lieutenant George Waddington, just wanted to talk to you about the landing craft, the Royal Navy's involvement with the landing craft on D-Day.
So yeah, as I said, there were 5,500 Royal Navy Reserve officers, but alongside that there were 43,500 ratings that also drove the landing craft, and they were not only dropping them off, they were going back to the ships, collecting more troops, and then coming back in and facing those same obstacles over and over again. So the involvement was pretty huge.
Yeah. Major Andy Atkinson, I just want to ask you about Mulberry Harbour, the remains of which we can see behind us now. You're talking about this being a logistical hub, and this is really a feat of civil engineering, isn't it?
Yes, so they needed a deep water port to offload stores, and the Germans had occupied the nearest deep water ports, and then if we attacked them, they probably would have mined them, and it would have taken months to prepare them. So some ingenious Brits came up with the idea of building a floating harbour, and they constructed it, and they sailed it across. And then on the 8th of June, they started sinking the caissons out there, and within a couple of weeks, they had a fully functioning harbour, which rapidly increased the speed for us to offload the stores. On the 19th, a big storm hit. The Americans lost their Mulberry Harbour, but ours survived, and then it was used for the next couple of months to offload stores, people, material, etc.
And that's what kept the Normandy landings going. It's what kept the troops equipped. And you can still see the remains of the Mulberry Harbour, John, if we just take you across. All of these remains that you can see in front of you here. This is the sea wall over there. This is all part of the Mulberry Harbour. It was huge, wasn't it? It was vast.
Yeah, it's very vast. Just to interrupt you, that's the landing craft making its approach now to drop off the Duck and the Piper.
Yes, and I believe that our reporter, thank you very much, both of you, an honour to meet you.